On the ocean world of Pelagos 9, the native species, the Velari, taught their young a single vital rule before they could even swim. If the water turns black and the current goes silent, you flee. That was the only way to survive the abyssal octopus. This creature was a legend, a force of nature older than cities, cleverer than most predators, and strong enough to tear a submersible in half. Entire migration routes for sea life carefully curved around its vast territory. Even heavily armed war fleets made sure to avoid the deep trench it claimed as its home. And yet on this day, something unprecedented was happening. A group of young Velari cubs were tying cooking line around one of its massive tentacles. This entire disaster, or perhaps this miracle, began with a human named Mara Kessler. Mara was an engineer assigned to Pelagos 9 as part of a long-term cultural exchange program. Her job was to fix desalination rigs and patch up underwater habitats. But in her free time, she did something that deeply unsettled the Velari elders. She cooked. For the Velari, food was simply fuel. It needed to be safe and reliable. It was not something you experimented with, but the young cubs. They absolutely adored Mara. They followed her everywhere on the floating platform, their small paws slapping on the metal decks, their furry ears twitching with an endless stream of questions. What is that smell? One would ask, why is it hot? Another would chirp, why is the water screaming? A third would wonder, pointing at a bubbling pot. Mara would patiently stir her concoction and explain. That, she'd say, is oil. It's hot because heat makes food taste better. And the water isn't screaming, it's boiling. The cubs would just stare at the pot with a mixture of reverent fear and deep fascination. Through these simple lessons, Mara was teaching them about controlled danger. The day the octopus appeared, Mara was out on the water, repairing a sensor buoy. Suddenly, alarms blared across the platform. Low-frequency pulses vibrated through the water, a terrifying, deep hum that every Velari recognized. An adult whispered the name in horror. The abyss. It's close. The elders immediately ordered a full retreat to the upper, more secure platforms. The cubs were quickly herded together, their panicked chirps filling the air. All of them, that is, except for six. 6 curious cubs who had learned something new, something uniquely human. Instead of panic, their ears flattened with intense focus. The human taught us, one of the cubs said, his small paws gripping a coil of reinforced cooking lime. Taught us what? Another asked, his body trembling with fear. The first cub looked at the churning water. That dangerous things can be prepared. Just then, the abyssal octopus rose from the trench like a nightmare given form. Its body was colossal, armored in a dark adaptive skin that shifted with the light. Eyes the size of transport windows scanned the surface, and its tentacles, thicker than ancient trees, writhed through the water, tasting everything. The adult Velari screamed for the cubs to run, to retreat to safety. And the cubs did run straight toward the supply shed. Inside were the tools Mara had shown them how to use. Thermocutters, buoyancy packs, and even some spice containers, which they'd mostly just played with. But they remembered her most important lesson. If something is too strong to fight head-on, you change the environment. The octopus struck first. A massive tentacle slammed down onto the platform, cracking the support pylons. The structure groaned as seawater rushed in. But the cubs moved with a terrifying, practiced coordination. One activated a buoyancy pack and leaped directly onto the thrashing tentacle, wrapping the tough cooking line around it as tightly as he could. Another cub triggered a thermocutter not to burn or sever, but to heat seal the line in place. The great beast recoiled, stunned. In all its long existence, nothing had ever dared to touch it. Down below, hearing the chaos, Mara sprinted toward the edge of the platform. When she saw the cubs dangling precariously over the water, her heart leaped into her throat. "What are you doing?" she shouted. The cub leader, holding the line, looked up at her, his eyes bright with a strange mix of fear and determination. "Cooking!" he yelled back. Mara swore under her breath. Then the cubs dropped. They'd plunged into the sea, their buoyancy packs keeping them just below the surface as the octopus thrashed in fury. The line they'd attached pulled taut, anchored to heavy stabilizers they had prepared and sunk earlier. The creature let out a roar, sound so powerful it shook the very sea floor. Mara grabbed a cum unit, her mind racing. "You need heat!" she yelled into it. "High heat, you need to shock it." The cubs responded instantly. They attached thermal charges along the length of the captured tentacle. These charges were normally used to cauterize hull breaches on submersibles, not lethal but incredibly painful. The water around the tentacle began to boil. The octopus convulsed, and a massive cloud of black ink billowed out, obscuring everything. But the Cubs had planned for this too. They released a special oil dispersant that Mara had once joked about using for deep-sea frying. The dispersant mixed with the ink, and as the thermal charges continued to pulse, the oily mixture ignited. For the first time in recorded history, the abyssal octopus panicked. It fled. It wasn't seriously wounded, it wasn't killed, but it was driven away by pain, confusion, and fear. The Velari elders watched in stunned silence as the turbulent water calmed and the 6 cubs resurfaced. Soaked, shaking, but victorious. Mara hauled them back onto the damaged platform, her heart still pounding in her chest. "You could have died!" she shouted, her voice a mix of anger and relief. The cubs lowered their ears in shame. "But it worked," one of them said quietly. Mara let out a long, shaky breath and rubbed her face. "Yeah," she admitted. "It did. The story should have ended right there. But humans never let a good lesson go to waste." In the weeks that followed, the Concord, the Galactic government, sent researchers to study the octopus's now abandoned territory. They mapped its migration patterns, finally understanding the creature they had feared for so long. And Mara cooked. She cooked with local fish, with strange kelp, with mollusks the Velari had never even considered edible. She showed them that their world was full of possibilities. Finally, one of the brave little cubs asked the forbidden question. "Human Mara," he said, "can the abyss be fully cooked?" The nearby elders promptly fainted. Mara just smiled slowly. "Well," she said, pulling out a large pan, "everything is food if you're brave enough." The hunt that followed was not violent. It was methodical. Using sound dampeners, temperature gradients, and pressure traps, all based on human logic, the Velari lured a much smaller, juvenile abyssal octopus into the shallow waters. It was stunned, not killed. Under Mara's careful supervision, a few tentacles were harvested sustainably. The creature was then released, alive, confused, and now significantly less territorial. The first dish was simple. Sliced octopus, lightly seared with a bit of salt and heat. The cubs watched with wide eyes as the meat curled and browned in the pan. They tasted it. A hush fell over the entire platform. Then a single cub whispered, "It's amazing." The elders stared at the plate as if it were a holy relic. Within a year, Pelagos 9 had a new tradition, Abyss Night. It was a celebration of survival, of ingenuity, and of a uniquely human concept that both terrified and fascinated the galaxy. Nature is dangerous, but it can be understood. The cubs grew up. They became engineers, tacticians, and explorers. And whenever a new alien species would warn them, "This creature cannot be fought," the Velari would smile and answer, "Perhaps not. But has anyone tried cooking it?" The lesson was clear. Humans don't just face the monsters of the universe. They'd put them in a pan, add a little heat, and teach the next generation how to survive with seasoning. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more tales from across the galaxy. See you next time.